Hey everyone, welcome to the Remote Real Estate Investor. I'm Pierre Carrillo, and today I'm joined with
Michael Albom.
and today we're going to be talking about the types of risks that arise in real estate investing and things we can do to mitigate it. So let's hop in. All right, Mike, here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, we're missing Tom and Emil today.
Only physically, but like not actually missing them.
Yeah, exactly. They're just not here.
I'm glad they're gone.
That spoke to no emotional. Oh,
That's
no,
awesome.
just kidding. We love you guys a little bit.
We miss you.
So the way this will work is I'm going to just run by some common risks. I want to get you to talk to me about what they mean for your bottom line and ways that we can avoid them or, protect ourselves from these things.
Yeah, totally. That sounds like a great topic. And it's funny, when I used to work as a professional fire protection engineer, risk mitigation was what we did. We engineered against losses. So now I'm just doing it in the real estate side of things.
And that's why I'm on this side of the conversation. All right.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. Let's talk about lack of liquidity. What does that mean? Why is that risky? And what can we do to mitigate that?
Yeah. Lack of liquidity is basically not having a lot of deployable cash on hand, ready and able to be used for things that come up, like a big repair or a big CapEx item that you weren't expecting for. Or a big one that I think a lot of people don't think about is an insurance premium. If you have a $2,500 deductible on your policy and a tree falls on your house and the roof damage is $5,000, you're on the hook for the first $2,500. And so being able to have, at a bare minimum, your insurance deductible on hand on a moment's notice, I think is really important. And so it's simply not having enough cash. That can be in the bank. You don't have enough cash. Another great place where you could store it is in a brokerage account. If you've got a $50,000 stock account and your kind of biggest exposure is 5 to 10,000, you're probably in a good place. If you've got a $5,000 stock account and your biggest exposure is 5 to 10 grand, maybe you don't want to keep those dollars in a stock account, which could essentially go to zero in a really bad market turn. So knowing where your liquidity is, how much you need, and how safe it actually is, I think is really important. And so another great place that I've seen people have access to liquidity is in the form of a HELOC on their primary residence. If you can write yourself a check for $10,000 tomorrow because you've got a $50,000 HELOC, that's a pretty safe place, in my opinion. So I guess in the hierarchical order of safety for where you could keep a reserve or where you keep some liquidity is cash in the bank. HELOCs are great. Stock market account would be kind of your probably least safe, so to speak.
I guess another way to bump into this lack of liquidity is being over levered. How would you mitigate against that?
That's a really good question. And everything we're talking about here today and on this podcast generally is subject to personal interpretation. And so what one person might qualify as being over levered, another person, it may not. They might be very comfortable with that amount of leverage. But basically what you're talking about is the amount of debt that you have on any given property. And so let's say a property, you're going to go buy it for $100,000. You could probably get 80% leverage on that property, meaning you could borrow 80 grand. You've got to bring 20% or 20 grand to the table. And now you've got an 80-20 loan on that property. Well, if you, in some extraordinary case, were able to get 100% financing, that means that somebody would give you 100 grand, you borrow 100 grand, now you have a $100,000 mortgage to pay on that property. Some people would argue that that's over leveraged. Even some people might argue that 80% is over leveraged. I'm of the personal opinion that I'm more concerned of the debt service coverage ratio. And so really what that means is just a fancy acronym, a fancy term for how much of the debt is able to be covered by the rent that I'm collecting. And so if I'm collecting $2,000 a month in rent and my $100,000 mortgage costs me $1,000 a month, it probably won't, but let's just use that number. That means I've got a debt service coverage ratio of 2.0, that I'm bringing in 2 times the mortgage payment. Now, I've still got all my other expenses that I need to calculate out. And let's say all my other expenses add up to $600 a month. So my total expense load, including my mortgage, is in this case $1,600. I'm bringing in $2,000, which means my cash flow to me is $400 a month. Well, if $2,000 is a very reasonable market rent, I personally am not concerned with having 100% leverage on that property, because I know I'm able to support the debt service. And so that's really the number that I'm more concerned with. But when people talk about being over leveraged, it's usually because they have a high amount of debt on a given property. And that also can often translate to having a high mortgage payment. And so if you're close to cash flow neutral or cash flow negative, I mean, if things take a dip or things go a little bit sideways, that's where you can start to get in trouble.
Okay. All right. I guess that debt servicing is paid by what will bring up our next topic, and that's difficult tenants. So can you talk to me about all the things that can arise with difficult tenants and how that...
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, anytime you're dealing with people, you can have literally anything happen because people are known to do kind of wild and crazy things. So there was this great podcast that I heard, it was Bigger Pockets podcast, and they had a professional poker player on, and I believe that she's written a book as well, and I forget the name of it, but she talks about evaluating the decision-making process more than the outcome. And so many of us look at the outcome and kind of in hindsight and say, oh, well, we made a bad choice. Well, if we made a good choice and the outcome wasn't as we wanted or as we predicted, that doesn't mean that we should change how we do things. And so I think we really need to look at the decision-making process and the tenant screening process that either you go through as a self-manager or that your property manager goes through as a management company. And that's what you want to be evaluating. Because you can go through a great evaluation process and have someone slip through the cracks and have a really crummy tenant experience. Does that mean you should go rework the whole system and change how you do things if you're self-managing or berate your property manager because they didn't do their job? Maybe not. And so I think that in looking again at being very process focused and process oriented, that will help hopefully catch some of those crummy tenants before they get through the system. That's what it's designed to do. But when and if they do make their way through, we're able to kind of take a step back and say, well, that sucked. Let's move on. Let's try to do better the next time. And what lessons can we learn and have takeaway from that experience?
Cool. Yeah. I mean, we just closed last month, just a couple of weeks ago. And just yesterday, we got notification that our tenants were up and moving out. So,
oh no! Any idea why?
Not yet. No, we're in communication with the property manager, so we'll find out today, like what the story behind it is and what it means, because they do have an existing lease,
right?
So, but that's just first month, no time to collect any reserves for a turn or anything. I mean, we have reserves in the bank for it, but still, we'd like to have that property behave as its own business.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the nice, not the nice thing, but the thing that you can hang your hat on is that given if you own this property long enough time, this will smooth itself out.
Right.
That this hit to your reserve account will tend to smooth itself out given a long enough time. But it's when things like this happen that people aren't prepared for is when you can get into real trouble. I mean, what if you didn't have reserves in the bank?
Yeah. No. We're not too bummed. I mean, we're a little bummed about it, but it's not taking us out of the game. We're not looking to sell the property yet.
Okay, good. Good. I'm really glad to hear it.
The next one I have here is neighborhood decline. Can you talk to me about that?
Oh, man. Go around, start mowing everybody's lawn, start painting everyone's house, prop up the neighborhood. If you are suffering or in an area that's suffering neighborhood decline, and it's the first, 1 to 3 years of you owning that property, people aren't going to like what I'm going to say next, but I would probably argue that you didn't do enough due diligence on the neighborhood. Things don't tend to change overnight. There tends to be signs and signals around how things are going in any direction. And so if you find yourself there, that probably means you didn't do your homework, but that's not a good solution or help anybody in that situation. So I would say you need to think about what the next 5 to 10 years looks like in that neighborhood and start doing some homework. Things change, both in the positive and the negative. And you have some really rough areas that have become really amazing areas in different markets all over the country. So, and neighborhoods can go through cycles. You just have to determine, is this a cycle that you want to be a part of? Or do you want to partake only once things have peaked or valleyed?
Right. So when you say signs, what are some of the things that you could be looking out for to make sure you are doing proper diligence up front?
Understanding where the market rents are going in an area, understanding what crime rates are like in an area and how they're shifting over time, understanding how the school ratings have changed over time, understanding if people are moving to the area or are they moving away, and then looking like physically at the neighborhood. Are people rehabbing properties? What do the properties look like? Are they decrepit? Are people no longer maintaining the homes that they're living in, either as renters or as owners? Are people putting money into the area? Those are all signs and signals about how a market or a neighborhood is going to be trending.
Okay, a couple of questions then. How do you go about getting all of that data? And as a remote investor, do you recommend going on site and traveling to the market and taking a drive around the neighborhood?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So 70% of my properties in my portfolio, I bought sight unseen. And I relied heavily on the property manager and local agents to give me a flavor of the market, to give me an idea of what's going on in the market. I've Google Earthed it and kind of taken that drive, so to speak, that quote unquote drive around the neighborhood to get an idea of what's going on. But those can be 1 to 2 years old. So,
right.
There is, and I'm going to eat my words here in a minute, but there is no substitute for going to see the market. Now, that's, I don't think by any means a hard and fast requirement. Because again, I purchased 70% of my property sight unseen. So it's something I talk a lot about in the Roofstock Academy, in that when you go visit a market, you are not going to be able to unsee and unhear and unexperience things that you experienced. So, and that's important to keep in mind because we are going to automatically put our personal and emotional biases into that experience. So imagine this, you go to a new market, Cincinnati, Ohio, and you get in, your flight gets delayed. They lost your car reservation when you got there, and you get to your hotel by 2 a.m. and you're exhausted. You're already going to be kind of upset. Then you go out to breakfast and have a crummy meal. They screw up your order. Now you're going to go start looking at properties with all of this already having built up for you physically and mentally. That's not going to be as great of an experience as it could be. And you're likely not going to be as unbiased as you could be. Now, take the opposite side of that. You go on a trip to somewhere else and you have this amazing experience and the people are so friendly and you have great service at the restaurants you eat at. You might have a rosier picture of reality than what it's actually like to live there as a tenant or as an investor. And so when you can remove the emotional side of the equation by simply talking to people locally and getting kind of facts and figures, there's a lot of merit for that as well. If you go somewhere that you've understood the facts and the figures and you have a great experience, okay, that's a cherry on top. But if you go somewhere that's a great investment market that meets all of your numbers, mathematically speaking, but you don't want to live there or you don't have a great time, I'm not so sure that means that that's a bad place to invest.
Right. Okay, so back to the first part of my question then. 70% of your properties are sight unseen. Where did you go to get, besides just calling your property managers, how did you find where the rents were trending, what the economy was doing? Like what kind of sites did you use to?
Yeah, I wish I was more scientific about it, but it was like Zillow and Google.
Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, that's super accessible to anybody.
Yeah, it's I didn't do anything that requires a paid subscription. I didn't do anything that anyone with a computer couldn't do themselves.
Okay, cool. Let's hop over to the next one. I just got a little visitor here that just hopped up on my lap.
Ah, it's an alien.
Unexpected repairs is our next topic. And these guys I just found under the gazebo in the backyard when they were like 2 years old. So they're an unexpected expense that have come up that we're trying to... So let's talk about unexpected repairs.
Are they forcing you to do some unexpected repairs at your current house?
No, that's why I'm in the kitchen now. Usually I'm in my office, but now I can't let them out of my sight. They are little domestic terrorists.
Running amok of the place.
Yeah, we're looking forward to getting rid of them.
But setting up some good homes, right?
Of course. We're hoping on the neighborhood so we can... I've known them since they were 2 days old, so I've grown quite fond of them.
I bet. Get rid of them could mean different things to different people depending on who you're talking to.
Yes, in the gentlest, kindest, humane way.
Love it. Love it.
So yeah, let's go.
Speaking of unexpected repairs.
Unexpected repairs. What does that look? I know you have had fires and all sorts of crazy stories throughout your journey. So I guess expect the unexpected is a platitude that we can say here, but what else can you do?
Yeah, I wish I had a more scientific approach or a more foolproof approach, but I think you nailed it. You just have to expect the unexpected. And Tom and I joke that there's this seemingly inverse relationship between the people who are prepared and the type of unexpected repairs they will have versus the folks that are not prepared and the type of repairs they have. And it tends to be, if you're well capitalized, you're well prepared, you expect the unexpected, you'll have a $50, circuit breaker go bad on you and you'll have to swap it out. Versus you think everything is going to go peachy, nothing could go wrong, and you're going to have a $20,000 repair slip up on you and it won't be covered by insurance. So, just be prepared for that old man Murphy.
Yeah.
He's going to show up. He's going to try to mess with you. Have a plan A, B, and C, I think is the best thing that you can do.
I guess we can pull up Tom's famous phrase here is just peanut butter spread.
Peanut butter spread the risk.
Peanut butter spread these risks out.
That's it. Something to think about, which may sound counterintuitive, is to help mitigate some of those unexpected repairs is scale. When you have one property and you have $1,000 repair, that could kill the entire cash flow for the year. Versus you have two properties and that same property has $1,000 repair. Now you're limping, but you're not dead in the water. You have a 5 property portfolio and you have $1,000 repair. It becomes a bit more of an easier pill to swallow. Now, some listeners out there might be like, yeah, but you could have $1,000 repair across each 5 of those properties, and that's $5,000. Yeah. Well, yes, that's true, but we have to look at statistics. And this is something we used to do in the insurance world at my last job, and talking about aggregate risk. What's the likelihood, going back to our single property, of you having $1,000 loss or repair on that one property? Fairly high. As soon as you start adding additional properties into the mix and the conversation, the statistical likelihood of you having a $1,000 repair at every single property you own tends to go down with additional properties. So, we talk about the same thing as vacancy. We apply the same theory, the same style of thinking to vacancy. The more properties you have, the less vacancy will tend to affect you on a portfolio level.
Yeah, it's when it hurts the most is when it's going to happen. So
that's it.
Or when you're at the most vulnerable is when it hurts the most.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool, Mike. That was the whole list that I had. Is there you want to give us a monologue on risk mitigation in general?
Yeah, sure. I could do my best. Here's
fire protection,
my monologue.
Insurance expert.
Yeah. I really do think that insurance is one of the biggest places where people can miss. And I think that insurance is, a lot of people think it's a catch-all where if anything goes wrong, that's why I have insurance. Well, yeah, that's true to an extent, but there are also exclusions as part of every policy, things that insurance will not cover. And so we don't want to be assuming that if we have a repair, insurance is going to come to the rescue. And even if they are, having dealt with insurance companies, it can be a battle. It can often take a long time to get your claims paid. I got the last of my claim paid, and it was over 2 years ago. And so if you're relying on those dollars to own and operate a property, and it takes 2 years to get the money, that can be a big problem. So I would really just recommend people take a look at their insurance policies, understand what their deductibles are, understand where their exposures are, and see how much money you think you need to play a really great defense. Because that's the best offense. I'm not a sports guy, but that was my sports analogy for the monologue.
Hey, offense and defense goes far beyond just sports.
Yes. Nailed it.
All right. I think that's a good place to wrap it up, dude. Thank you for sharing all that. That's helpful for me and hopefully for all of our listeners.
Yeah, my pleasure. Great questions, Pierre. Thanks for asking and putting that list together.
All right, everyone. That was our episode. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one. Happy investing.
Happy investing.